How I got my start in this industry was I was working in fashion in New York. I went on an interview for a music video and started doing that with a director named Milcho Manchevsky. And then he hired me later for a film called Dust. So that's how I got my start in film and TV. I joined 829 in New York. I can't remember what year. And then moved to Los Angeles and joined 892. Throughout my work, the thing that's always important to me is how will I relate to it personally? And, some say that costumes should not be personal, but I don't know any other way to approach that. I like to get engaged immediately, and so having a personal connection always does that. With Pan Am, it was something that I was quite interested in. Feminism was happening subtly below the surface, and these women were spies, and that was intriguing to me. So how do you take that as an impetus and use it in the fashions of the 60s? I was looking up all the things that happened between January and December of 1963. I found information on my uncle who had no idea was on the plane with JFK. So then it became much more exciting and voracious for me to do a really good job and to be personally attached. I didn't have formal training as a costume designer, and so my imagery comes from whatever I'm into, really. I think, hopefully that's not a selfish thing to say, but I think that creative people have that within their ego. And it comes from music because that will evoke such crazy inspiration that the research starts to flow, and it's all over the place. I was having a hard time on The Handmaid's Tale to find this whole new world that we were building for season 2 called The Colonies, and I kept calling it This Bitter Earth, which is really weird and twisted, but the truth. And so one day on a Saturday when I knew I had to have everything to show the tailors, I just Googled This Bitter Earth. And the first song that came up was this Dinah Washington, beautiful song. And that was on repeat for a whole Saturday, Sunday, and everything got done. Not only did it fuel the visuals for the costumes, but I played it for each and every actor when they came in for a fitting to get them in the mood, and also for every background player. So it kind of became this theme for season 2. So Handmaid's Tale was a book that changed my life. I remember that time of my brain opening. And then when I was asked to go speak with the show's creator, Bruce Miller, and Warren Littlefield, the show's producer, everybody was quite, in a nerdish way, in love with the story and also quite concerned. How do we tell this story? How do we make it not, girls in cloaks so that nobody cares and they're like, oh, wow, it was so horrible in another time and, a time in the past in history. This is not about the past. This show is about right now. I can only create in one way, which is to create so immensely and so personally that I collapse at the end. That's not for everybody, but I painted the same way, I costume designed the same way, I kind of live my life the same way. And then you have to pull back and you have to look at what have you created, and I think that's something no one's ever told me, but I'm very late in life figuring it out, that's a good way in to be able to create again for another project. Take time off. When I start to pull together research, what's funny is that every producer and show's creator will say, there's not one picture of clothing here. I'm not quite sure where you're headed, and I'm a little afraid because you're showing me pictures of like moths and and dirt and raging skies. And I'm like, yeah, it's all right there. Often I'm not talking about how a jacket fits the body at first. I'm talking about how that jacket envelops someone and keeps them apart from the next person. So I'm always talking emotion and psychology, and I get on really well with actors, I think for that reason, and directors. And then everybody else falls into place. How does one talk about getting one's work in the Smithsonian? I am shocked by everything in my life. I'm not going to lie. And I've said it to the press, so it's no big shocker to anybody watching this. But, I was never supposed to be a costume designer. I didn't study it. I sort of fell into it and, had some horrible times and great times, and then just found myself here after all these years, and it stuck. So I'm so grateful, and I'm saying it to the universe. But how do you say thank you to the Smithsonian? I mean, it doesn't even make sense. And I was excited, yes, because it's the Smithsonian, and it's such a Americana thing to be a part of on so many levels. My mom is an immigrant. That's a big deal that her daughter's in the Smithsonian, obviously. But beyond that, the idea that this will be in a permanent place on the floor, across from the ruby slippers someday. A costume designer designed those, which is super cool, Adrian, who's from Indiana. So that's just across the bridge from where I'm from. And that has a whole nother pride, point for me. It's a very abstract idea to be a costume designer. I don't think that I hold a real definition for someone, but what I can say is that I've made it this far as someone who was never supposed to be here. And I hear this story a lot, actually, now that I'm in my 50s, It's become a kind of mantra that I hear echoing through other people's stories. I hear it a lot with directors. I hear it a lot with actors, especially. Some of my favorite people were never meant to be the people that they are. And I think when that happens in life, you have to be really formidable in your sense of self. And I think that's hard. I think most artists, myself included, are incredibly shy, incredibly insecure, and think nobody thinks the same. We don't bring clothes. Anybody can do that. You might as well just have the actors dress themselves, is what I tell someone when they say they want to take over the job that I'm hired to do. Let them just come from home, tell that story. If you're telling this story, this script, which is in front of us right now, let me bring the alchemy. Let me knit it all together. The production design, the cinematography, let me be the glue and the cement, because we often are. So you can accept that now, or I'll just spank you later. I'm Ane Crabtree, and I'm a proud member of the Costume Designers Guild.